For finding the key attributes of linear functions, it's important that we know what those key attributes are. So for a linear function, a straight line, the most important things we need to find on the graph are slope, which you don't need to memorize. This is on your star chart. M equals y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. Rocks, remember that's roots, zeros, x-intercepts, and solutions. All of those words mean the same thing. All of those words mean where does the line cross this x-axis? And then y-intercept is, of course, where it crosses the y-axis. So whenever we're looking at a graph, if it goes whichever direction we're looking at, where does it cross this y-axis? So let's look at the first question. A lifeguard earns $320 per week for working 40 hours plus $12 per hour worked over 40 hours. A lifeguard can work a maximum of 60 hours per week. So we want to go in and circle our numbers. That way we know what we're looking for in our graph. 320 per week for working 40 hours plus $12 per hour worked over 40 hours. They can work a maximum of 60 hours per week. So if the minimum amount of money they can work or they can get is $320, that's going to be our starting point. Because what we're looking at is the number of hours worked over 40. So if they work at least 40 hours, that means they make $320. So graph F starts at 320 and so does graph G. They both start around 320. H and J cannot be the answer because they both start at 0. The next thing is it says they get $12 per hour for each hour worked over. So notice the graph is counting by fives. That means if they work 5 hours on this first graph, they would get $60 because we would do 5 times 12. 60 plus the original 320 would be 380. And then we have to decide, looking at graph F, does that look like it goes from 320 to 380? And it looks, if this is 320, I don't know if this would be 380. It looks like the second graph would be closer to 380 because it's closer to 400. So I would pick letter G on this one. Let's look at the next problem. The graph of a function is shown on the grid. Which ordered pair best describes the location of the y-intercept? So remember, the y-intercept is where it crosses the y-axis. In this case, it's at -2. Now here's the problem. We have two answers that say -2. We have letter G and letter J. So remember, this is the y-intercept. So this is where the y is -2. Remember, our coordinates are in the form x, y. So G must be our answer. Let's look at the third question. The graph of the linear function G is shown on the grid. What is the 0 of G? Now remember, up at the top we did our notes. Another word for 0 is x-intercept. So where is it at on the x-axis? So we have two coordinates given to us on this graph, but neither one is actually the x-intercept. We need to see where does this cross the x-axis, which is here at -6. So our answer that we would bubble in would be -6. Remember, it's very important on a star test to bubble in the negative if the answer is negative. You have to bubble negative to get it correct. On this last question, the easiest way to solve these is to go to a graph page in your calculator. So open up a graph page. And then notice this equation. It's not in the form y equals, so that means we have to do delete and relation in order to graph this equation. From there, you're going to see which graph matches the graph that you got on your calculator. You also want to look for things like, is the graph going up or down? Where is your y-intercept? So take note of things like your y-intercept, your x-intercept, and how does the slope look on the graph. Those are ways that you can match the graph correctly.